And we're now going to move on to our third presenter, and that is Leah Rea. Leah's paper is titled Tread Carefully, the UK Parliament as a Human Rights Defender within the Northern Ireland Devolution Framework. So over to you, Leah.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah and I'm a PhD researcher from the Transitional Justice Institute School of Law at Ulster University, and it's been a great day so far. I find these discussions really illuminating, so hopefully I can contribute to the ongoing discussion with my presentation. Now within this, as you can see, Tread Carefully, the UK Parliament as a human rights defender within the Northern Ireland Devolution Framework. I'm really seeking to examine that role of the UK Parliament in addressing what are identified human rights issues, the compliance of the UK as a state signatory to various international treaties pertaining to human rights standards in the context of devolution. And I'm doing this through the case study of the use of parliamentary procedure in the House of Commons to seek reform around what was then the former law governing termination of pregnancy or abortion in Northern Ireland in the time frame of 2018 to 2019. I suppose it's probably useful to just give a bit of context. So the devolved institutions in Northern Ireland failed to function. They stood down in January 2017 through different political issues, and an early election was called in March 2017. But following that election, the Northern Ireland Executive was not able to reform. It could not be, that political agreement could not be reached. So subsequently, the devolved institutions did not sit and did not function in Northern Ireland from March 2017 up until January 2020. And during this time, there were many key developments in recognition of human rights violations arising from this former law on abortion in Northern Ireland. And in light of this, parliamentary procedure was utilised in some key moments within the House of Commons to raise that matter of human rights non-compliance, what the UK government was doing in its behaviour of not complying with its own international standards and international human rights law, and the need for legislative intervention in the ongoing absence of Northern Ireland institutions. And I suppose by way of my research, this is really a side project for me along with my main PhD study. But essentially, I'm trying to understand what is the role of the UK Parliament in ensuring the UK's compliance with the government's obligations under international human rights law in the context of devolution. And that's quite particular given, firstly, the UK government is bound by Section 98 of the Northern Ireland Act of 1998 to ensure compliance with international obligations in respect of Northern Ireland, but also twofold. The second part, what would you do, particularly in the absence of a Northern Ireland executive, and then the absence subsequent to that of any direct legislative intervention from the UK government, and that has been successive over a protracted period of time. But this case study is specifically the 2018-2019 context. And for me, the question I was trying to answer with this case study in mind was, at what political point or juncture can legislative intervention be sought and successfully acquired from the UK Parliament to rectify ongoing human rights issues in Northern Ireland? Now, by way of a theoretical framework, it's well known that scholarships such as Jennings, Marshall and Modi have all agreed that constitutional conventions are necessary to ensure the adaptability of the British Constitution in particular, to be in accordance with different changes in the UK. So most notably for our instance here, devolution, what devolution means to the UK constitutional framework. And this research will accept that these conventions are necessary to ensure the recognition and the functioning of devolution and preventing any undermining of what are legislative parameters regarding legislative competencies. But the actual operation application of those conventions can be contested. And we know that Marshall has talked about the existence of a convention may be doubted, may not be doubted, but its applications can be, particularly in particular situations, the application or adherence to a convention can be open to argument. And I think it's also interesting to note what Andrew Blick has to say around what really is the perception of key political actors, in this instance, the UK government, being that conventions can be very dependent upon what people think as regards their establishments and their ongoing sustenance as well. But I think it still raises that fundamental question of why is it the UK government for a protracted period of time has really relied upon the Sewell Convention as a reason for not undertaking direct intervention to legislate to rectify human rights issues in Northern Ireland. And for me, I do accept that these conventions are necessary of government, or in the absence of action being undertaken by devolved Northern Ireland governments to rectify their own issues in Northern Ireland, there is that loophole, as I've looked at previously, through Section 98 of the Northern Ireland Act of 1998 to enable whatever the British government of the day may be to undertake that direct legislative interaction to meet their international obligations. And I think it's also worthwhile to note that UN treaty monitoring bodies take this approach as well. They also cite the Vienna Convention, and that international law can't be neglected, standards can't be neglected by invoking domestic statute in this instance. So in terms of conducting the study, it was very much a content analysis approach, trying to extract meaning from data, namely through examination of Hansard reports pertaining to any discussion relating to human rights around Northern Ireland in the House of Commons of the UK Parliament. And I analysed the specific themes that underpin arguments that were being raised by proponents, as I call them, proponents of direct legislative intervention from Westminster, and also the analysis of the types of parliamentary procedure that they utilised in order to advance their argument and advance their call and demands on the sitting UK government. And finally, I analysed the themes and the choice of words that were put forward by government representatives, namely from the Northern Ireland office, in response to the proponents of direct legislative intervention. So moving on into actually undertaking the case study. The first instance was an emergency debate scheduled on the 5th of June 2018. Now, there was a referendum result in the Republic of Ireland, in the south of Ireland, which found in favour of constitutional reform of the Constitution of Ireland to remove what was the 8th Amendment, which really prohibited abortion bar in very extreme circumstances. And the result of that referendum was that there was fresh political impetus to address the situation of abortion and reproductive healthcare rights in Northern Ireland. And bear in mind, there had been no assembly or executive for over a year at this point. And one proponent of direct legislative intervention was Leah Rea, a backbench Labour MP. And she utilised standing orders number 24 to bring forward an emergency debate in the House of Commons to raise the fact that there had been a change in, or there would be forthcoming legal change in the Republic of Ireland, which would now mean that Northern Ireland was very much in a vacuum as regards abortion access across the British and Irish Isles. Now, her argument was quite interesting because she cited the context of UN CEDAW's committee, which found that there were grave and systematic violations of human rights of women and girls in Northern Ireland due to the operation of this law. And she also referenced that the 1861 Act was governing abortion in Northern Ireland at this time was not just relating to Northern Ireland, it was a UK-wide law. So she very much stressed the Northern Ireland specific issue, but she also raised it within the context of it being a UK-wide matter, which I sort of suggest it's her way of trying to navigate balancing devolution and balancing the UK government's human rights obligations. But she very much stressed upon the House of Commons that they needed to act because it was a matter for the whole House, because it was an issue affecting the whole of the UK. In response, however, the then Secretary of State of Northern Ireland affirms the Sewell Convention, simply stating that abortion had been a devolved matter in Northern Ireland since its creation in 1921. It would not be appropriate for Westminster to legislate because it is a matter that should be decided upon by the devolved institutions upon their return. She did not even broach the issues raised about it being a UK-wide matter. She saw it, and the government saw it through the lens of being a Northern Ireland specific call for action. So the emergency then debate concluded, but we do see what begins to be a pattern used by proponents of direct legislative intervention and the response then of the British government. Just 2 days later, Leah Rea again sought to utilise parliamentary procedure by bringing forward an urgent question on the 7th of June 2018. And it was that morning that the UK Supreme Court found that the law governing abortion in Northern Ireland was a human rights concern. Now, they did not issue a declaration of incompatibility under the Human Rights Act of 1998 due to a legal technicality about the standing of the Human Rights Commission who brought the legal challenge. But quite unusual for the court, they did give quite a descriptor as to their perception of the law and the human rights issues that arose thereafter. And Stella Creasy directly, in this case, directly challenged the UK government to recognise that now a court, the highest court in the UK, had found there was an issue of human rights non-compliance in Northern Ireland. And again, she takes that approach of the specific issue in Northern Ireland, but she very cleverly relates it back to the UK by asking for the government to bring forward what was then the draft domestic abuse bill to make abortion be seen in the context of violence against women and girls, and therefore create a UK-wide solution. Again, we see in response another affirmation, however, of the Sewell Convention, simply that the government's view abortion was a devolved matter and that they would not legislate to intervene in this instance, despite the finding of the UK Supreme Court. I'll quickly mention what happens in 2018. There was a bill going through called the Northern Ireland Executive Formation and Exercise of Functions Bill, and that was brought in to try to provide a greater time frame for the restoration of devolved government. That was a strict purpose, just to create this greater period of time. But Stella Creasy and other proponents sought to hijack the bill in a sense by bringing forward an amendment that would make the Secretary of State of Northern Ireland have to issue guidance to civil servants in Northern Ireland around non-compliance with the then current abortion law. And Stella Creasy talked about it would be a matter where the UK Parliament and UK government could hold themselves to account by supporting this amendment. So again, we start to see a bit of a move away from balancing devolution and a more of a recognition that the UK Parliament has to act. And in response, again, from the Secretary of State of Northern Ireland, this affirmation of Sewell, the UK government wasn't happy with this amendment being brought forward. They felt it started to blur the lines with the Sewell Convention and the legislative parameters set out by devolution. However, the amendment was successfully carried and it did become law. And that's how we start to see the mission creep that leads us into the case study of the Northern Ireland Executive Formation Act of 2019. And again, by that stage, the 2018 Act had expired. The government needed a new time frame to be introduced to continue with political negotiations, and they brought forward the Executive Formation Bill, and they did so on a fast-tracked process. So they very clearly needed this bill carried and carried quickly. And Stella Creasy uses this as a vehicle to really push the UK government into a corner. And she tables an amendment called New Clause 10, which would effectively see the Secretary of State be bound by the UN CEDAW recommendations from its 2018 investigatory report to repeal the 1861 Act in Northern Ireland. And this time she directly challenges the UK government. It's no longer about navigating around a UK-wide matter. It's specific to Northern Ireland. And the House has responsibility, and she cites Section 98 of the Northern Ireland Act and cites the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, that Parliament itself has a role in rectifying this human rights matter, and that human rights cannot be denied. Parliamentarians have to do their job. And
Leah, you have about 1 minute left.
Certainly, this is a very seminal moment because in response, the UK government actually initially affirms Sewell, but then invokes another convention of the issue of conscience votes and says that in this instance, it will not whip its MPs to reject this amendment, and the amendment successfully carries. So very quickly, I'll just say this is a very interesting case study because it makes us inquire about what exactly is the Sewell Convention in this context of human rights and in this context of devolution. What happens when other parliamentary conventions are invoked? Is it a case of a hierarchy, or is it a case of simple political expedience, which refers back to the theory put out by Andrew Blick around the operations of political actors? So thank you very much for listening, and I greatly welcome any questions you might have.